Hello and welcome to me, the Godless Engineer. Tonight, I am discussing the Salvation Army with the Neo-Atheist. The Neo-Atheist is he mainly lives over on secular TV on YouTube, and tonight we're going to be discussing the Salvation Army. And with the Salvation Army, he was pretty steeped in the cult a good bit. So we're really talking about what it means to be in that organization or that cult, and what he experienced in it, and just really have a kind of a casual discussion on it. So, Neo, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Well, I'd be glad to, Godless Engineer. Thank you for the opportunity for tonight. I always enjoy talking about the Salvation Army and their practices and just give a little information on what goes on behind the fuzzy and cuddly version of what they actually are. But we'll dive into that in a few minutes. I am one of the co-founders of Secular TV. It's an amazing network. Feel free to go check it out. Links are below to that. So we actually just picked up a new TV show from the Broom.
Welcome to the Rambling Tangent. We are the
Whoa, that was actually the wrong video to pull up. From Clarky Clark. He is actually one of the hosts of the Rambling Tangents. That is now on Secular TV. It's an amazing show. Feel free to go check it out. We also have Transcending Gods over there, but we also have an amazing podcast called The Age of Reason, which I'm actually the host of. The Foxhole Atheist and Albany Rose are my co-hosts on that show, and they are great to have on that as my wingmen and women. So yeah, I'm one of the co-founders over there. If you're looking to get into the secular perspective or network with other secular-minded individuals, feel free to give me a message, and I'm always looking for new content to host over on Secular TV, so it's always a pleasure. But yeah, let's break into the conversation that we should be talking about topic-based tonight. Godless Engineer.
Yes, we are talking about the Salvation Army. Um, and with the Salvation Army, I mean, if any of you guys don't know, the Salvation Army are the bell ringers basically that stand outside Walmarts and whatnot and ask you for money during the Christmas holidays. That's when you mainly see them. I actually had a friend who was part of a kind of like a imitation police force kind of thing that was hired out to actually work security at a Salvation Army kind of like a shelter, and so I got to experience that side of them too. They also had kind of like a store that people that lived at the shelter basically could work at in order to stay living at the shelter. So they kind of put themselves forth as a charitable organization that, and their slogan is doing the most good, which I always found has been just laughable, because to say that you're doing the most good, that means that you're doing more good than a lot of other charitable organizations. So I think that to say that you're doing the most good, you've really got to live up to that, but which the Salvation Army really doesn't. And I guess this is what has gotten me really skeptical about them. Of course, they're a religious organization in the first place, which had me skeptical to begin with. But, um, with their claim to do the most good, it is. It just got me, really doubting it. And that was really shown, I think it was last year, when a bunch of news articles started coming out about how they would withdraw toys from LGBT uh, the LGBT community. I believe it was, and so they're not as inclusive or doing the most good as people would think. They're doing the most of their kind of good. So I guess in their definition of good, they're doing good. But just give you a little bit of a background. Sorry, Neo, were you gonna say something?
No, no, I'm just wait.
Okay.
I'm just listening to you weigh in.
Yeah. Okay, so just to give everybody a background on it, it's a Christian denominational church that is fairly quasi military in fashion. And from what Neo has told me, they sound very militaristic. Um, and, y- that they're I can't even really put it into words, so I think that we just need to let dive into the conversation with Neo. So, Neo, why don't you start off here and just tell us, start off the conversation with about your initial experiences with the organization.
Well, the my first time in as a Salvationist or as a soldier in the Salvation Army was actually when my mother started attending one of their churches here in Central New York in Syracuse. I went there for from the ages of 9 to 14, and it was a pretty unique experience. I found it so interesting and wanted to make my mother proud. I actually, at the age of 14, started attending soldiering, the soldiering course that's offered through the Salvation Army to become an enlisted member of the Salvation Army, so that you actually are. It's sort of like a low level deaconship, and you actually are a member of the Salvation Army Corps. I went to camps out in Geneva here in upstate New York. It's a little lower in New York, but yeah, it was a pretty interesting experience. It was sort of like the military and a non-denominational church had a love child. That's what it's like. You actually get into the mindset that you are a soldier for the Lord, and you actually have to sign something called the Salvation Army Articles of War. It's actually a promise or a contract that you won't drink, that you won't fornicate out of wedlock, and a few other crazy things to actually promise. But it's kind of weird. Um, a few months after that, I quit drinking the Kool-Aid and decided to branch off on my own into another an Assemblies of God church and use that as my gateway out of religion. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. It was like being in the JROTC while still going to a religious organization. It was kind of weird. I would have to use that as a word that you'll probably hear a lot tonight. Weird was one of the experiences that you learn to deal with a lot. Religious indoctrination takes a completely new level of crazy when they look at themselves as being on a holy mission and putting a militarized type of presence behind it.
Wow. Your description of the the thing that you had to sign there, it really reminds me of those con or not I guess they're moral contracts that some colleges like I guess the Brigham Young college, I think is what it is. But it was the Mormon college. They would regularly kick out their students because they would violate this moral contract that includes a lot of the same things that you're talking about there. So it's kind of scary how that translates to other to other denominations of Christianity. But so you were growing up, and at 15 you were signing this thing to basically be a soldier in this fight for God, right?
I was actually doing that at 14. That's actually when we signed that. They actually start letting you do stuff like that at the age of 14. I went through a 3-week course and then signed the Salvation Articles of War, as they call it. It's sort of like a moral contract of purity. It has tenets that you can't violate, or else you risk your membership as a member of the Salvation Army. Which was what it was actually like. You actually can't start going to these pre-prepped courses to become a no-list member of the Salvation Army unless you actually have the Pastoral Care Council of your local congregation approve you doing this. You actually have to have it was a council of 12 at our local Salvation Army chapter that had to actually approve each person that went through the program before they actually started the course.
Wow. Like, as far as being okay, talk about the courses that you were having to take. What were those like? Like, what were contained in them? Like, were you just pretty much learning about the Bible, or was it more than that?
Well, it's learning about the Bible in depth. It's learning about the Salvation story, and just basically going through the manual of the Salvation Army, and understanding the just the underlining principles that you have to follow as a member of the Salvation Army itself. As it's like any strong presence that has a religious mindset behind it. You have to. They actually say right in their tenets that homosexuals are evil and that they're going to hell. They're going to burn for eternity. Anyone that's a sinner, they're going to basically be cast into a lake of fire. It's basically just your fire and brimstone 101 type of rhetoric.
Wow. Yeah, let's see. I'm on the Wikipedia page for it right now, actually. It says the beliefs are: we believe that the scriptures of the Old and New Testaments were given by inspiration of God, and that they only constitute the divine rule of Christian faith and practice.
Yes.
So does that mean like they think that it should only be the Christian faith that rules, or the divine rule?
At the end of the day, management and obeying the tenets that you basically sign in the contract are basically upheld to a standard of the local leadership of the geographical location in which you're in. But with that being the case, most perceive that Christianity or Salvationists are the leaders of the spiritual community, and it's their job to do good. Yet you have to be. There's always an indoctrinization going on behind any type of goodwill that's given through the Salvation Army. They're always trying to evangelize to the masses. That's the driving force behind an organization like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Salvation Army has done a lot of good, but there's always a driving motivation behind that, and that driving motivation is indoctrinization of the masses.
Well, yeah, it kind of seems like it. Because I mean, with any time that I've heard anybody say that they're a warrior for God, they mean that they're out there trying to convert people. So it doesn't surprise me that in every single facet of everything that they do, they're trying to evangelize to people and trying to get them to convert to their faith. Um, let's see, they believe in the Godhead. So I was trying to find a list of the stuff that's contained in that moral or that that thing that you were talking about.
The Articles of
The,
War.
yeah,
Yes. It's sort of like a pillars-based thing. Anything that's basically a cardinal sin with Catholic beliefs practices, or just from a biblical standpoint. It's sort of like that. Like drinking, fornicating out of wedlock. Haven't signed it. Haven't had to deal with this over. It's been close to 13 to 14 years since I've actually seen this thing. So thinking
yeah.
back, it's kind of hazy. But those are the two that sort of jump out at me. Obeying the Bible and all the laws that exist within it, existing as a warrior for God and being a testament to His power within your lifetime and living as such. Basically, just simplistic things like that from a biblical standpoint.
Hmm. So, something has been kind of going through my head. The bell ringers that we commonly see, are they part of the actual Salvation Army, or what part are, like, I guess I just didn't know if maybe you were like at one point you had a bell and you were ringing it in the cold, freezing your balls off out there.
Yes, I did that for a few winters. It actually works on two different situations. It's either some of those people are out there getting paid minimum wage, some of them are actually volunteers. Some of that money that you're putting into those baskets actually or into those buckets does actually go back into the community, but there's always a stipulation behind it. I've actually read and seen of situations to where transvestites or people that are homosexual have tried to go to shelters that are ran by the Salvation Army, and they're turned away because their specific views don't meet with the mission statement of the Salvation Army. But back to the bell ringing content. Yes, some of that is actually minimum wage paid workers, and some of that are volunteers. It's all individually based on the situation of each person involved in it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. At least they are, because I was always wondering if they actually were getting paid out there, or if they were like volunteering their work. Because I mean, I guess every time I see them, I was always like, they could be doing something so much better. Because I mean, the whole doing the most good really kind of grates on me. Whenever I see that. Um, but what I guess next would be what made you start questioning it? Like what got you first, to start to question, your involvement in this army?
Well, I actually had a mentor that was a leader in the church, and he passed away. Once that individual passed on, people basically said, "Oh, he's with God. Oh, he's with God. Oh, he's with God." And that really struck a chord with me because why would God, in my opinion, I was still just an adolescent, still just a teenager, but I was still wondering why would a God take someone that was so devoted to him and that was doing so much for him before his time? What purpose would that really serve? And it just made me start asking questions that were getting run-of-the-mill answers and just getting the basic, well, this is part of God's plan and that's how things are done. it just didn't really feel like it was ringing true with me. So I started looking into it, and it started raising questions that people were unwilling to answer outside of the confines of just it. It's part of the God's plan, giving me specific Bible verses that explain, well, death is something that is a part of God's divine intervention, and just those type of run-of-the-mill answers. And it just, as I've said, didn't really ring true with me. So I started questioning, and it rose the skeptical mindset within me that gave rise to the beginning steps of me becoming the neo-atheist.
Yeah, that always got me too. Thinking about, um, death, and because I haven't had a lot of death in my life, but you know when my grandfather died, and of course everybody was saying that he was in heaven and whatnot. That really, I mean, that didn't set me on my path, but I mean, I didn't actually think that he was in heaven or anything like that. But I was already kind of questioning them. But as I started falling, further out, it sure didn't, try to hold me back or anything like that. Um, but so when you were actually in the Salvation Army before your mentor died, um, what did your do like? What did you do? Like, did you go and evangelize to people, or I guess I just don't know how, like, what was the span of time, but between you getting full fledged into it, and then starting to fall out.
Well, see, even before I actually started the whole thing with actually becoming an enlisted member of the Salvation Army, there's actually something called junior soldiers in the Salvation Army, and little breakdown of what that is. The Salvation Army takes it very seriously, the capacity of children, and making it to where their spiritual beliefs are authentic, and it making it an authentic Christian experience. A junior soldier is a boy or girl who has professed conversion, or that has admitted to having a strong love or belief for a God. And they basically sign their junior soldier promise. It's sort of a little more of a weaker version of the tariffs you sign as the art of war for the Salvation Army. It's like one step below that. It's like, I will pray to God every day. I will dedicate my life to the Lord. It's sort of like the first steps to becoming an enlisted member in the Salvation Army. It's like, think of it as junior churchgoers and just being an active member in a after-school church program, or just a teen program for church. It's sort of like Sunday school for the Salvation Army, yet they're basically pre-programming people to be active members in a church army for God, but they consider themselves spiritual warriors. But having signed the junior soldier promise, and this actually occurs between the ages of 7 and 13, and they become Salvationists. They take a solemn vow to be a Salvationist, and they can actually wear they're a younger version of the uniforms you actually see in the Salvation Army. You can either wear it going through the junior soldiers program, or you can actually get one after going through the program at the age of 14 and actually becoming an enlisted member of the Salvation Army. But that's sort of where it starts. They believe in junior soldiers. They're not members of the enlisted Salvation Army. They're junior soldiers, as it actually says. But with that being the case, they go to summer camps, and most of their activities, from at least a socialistic perspective, are within the Salvation Army Church, and they dedicate themselves to a active role of serving the Salvation Army as a spiritual warrior for the Lord.
You know, any time that I hear spiritual warrior for the Lord, I think of that woman off of Wife Swap. I think it was. You know that's a warrior for God.
Megan Fox, the one that did that tour through the creationist museums, who I think of.
Oh, God.
She is one of the craziest people you'll ever come across, yet there's bound to be somebody that drinks the Kool-Aid and goes that direction.
Yeah,
And
and she had a whole. She had you know those huge coolers that they dump on the coaches after they win. She did that, except it all went into her mouth.
something like that, yes. I would have to completely agree with you on that one.
um, but yeah, I can't even believe like the psychological aspect of being 14 years old and like being sworn basically into this army for God, you know, and saying that you're gonna be a soldier for Christ and whatnot. Um, I don't know if you've already explained this in our conversation here, but what exactly would be a soldier for Christ? I mean, is it purely just like evangelizing, or like is it like some kind of, I guess, forceful evangelizing? Not exactly like the conquistadors that overtook the North Americas or anything, but a bit more forceful evangelizing. Maybe one step below the WBC or something like that.
I wouldn't actually say it's forceful evangelizing, though there is some people that would conceive it as that. I would say it's more people actually going and considering it something of a personal mission to make you part of the church, to make you part of what it is to worship God. That being said, you do have a personal stake in it. You feel that you fail if you can't get through to someone that doesn't believe in the Lord. Which, now that I think back on, I mean, I understand where that mindset comes from. I understand what can bring that mindset about, but it still seems foreign to me after being away from it for so long. How could I drink the Kool-Aid to such a degree?
Well, you know what this honestly sounds like to me? It sounds like Salvationists are basically telemarketers for religion, because they never want to take no for an answer. And it seems like to me what you're describing is that they are basically, the sect that doesn't want to take no for an answer. So they are going to make you join their club no matter what, and they will try as hard as they can. Would that be an accurate description?
For the most part, yeah, I would have
Okay.
to say so. The one thing that I would say they differ from most religious organizations on is the uniforms, the military mindset behind it. I mean, the uniforms and the expression that goes into them is an act all their own. I mean, you're actually led to believe that keeping your uniform as tidy as possible and just keeping it as clean cut as you can is a way to show that you are a good Christian and in service to the Lord, which, I mean, I've been in the military. I've seen this type of mindset on a practical sense, but it doesn't make sense to see that in a civilian sector outside of something that doesn't function as a military. It's like there's a military presence behind them, and most of them don't even realize it's there.
It's like I won't join the military, but I'll join God's military.
Yeah, I'm not going to actually fight for my country, but I will put my life on the line, or I will do whatever I can for my Lord and Savior because He is the God that died for my sins. It's that mindset that all Christians have, yet it's one step further because you consider yourself a spiritual warrior at the core of everything you do. It's one of the driving forces behind every action that you actually participate in.
Yeah, well, I mean, wouldn't it more or less be? It wouldn't really be. I'm gonna risk my life. It'd be more or less like I'm gonna go and have arguments.
Something like that. But there is a, if I don't save your soul, I'm going to be a failure in the eyes of my Lord.
Oh
Everything
wow.
I have to do, everything I have to give it to the Lord, because at the end of the day, if I don't, I'll be failing Him. Which it is a lot of pressure to put on some people at such a young age. I mean, the indoctrination that occurs from that perspective is so dynamic, so strong, that it can have everlasting repercussions on your psyche if it actually is done long enough, which is one form of indoctrination that I consider a crime and just abuse towards children, because of it hinders them at their core. It takes away their innocence because you're already stealing a part of who they are.
Yeah, I mean, and I can't completely relate, because I mean, giving it up like that to a deity, that that is so abusive in general. I can't really compare anything that I've experienced to that, but on a small level, I can because, when I was growing up, my parents had these unreal expectations placed on me, and they had a they forced this position on me that I should be thinking of others, or thinking of basically just saying that they, like my parents and my brothers and my sisters were more important than me, basically placing them like so far above me, kind of like a, I don't want to say Cinderella kind of deal, but basically I was dirt and they were at the top of the food chain. And so I kind of feel like that's on a very small scale something similar to what you're describing there, because I mean, and I'll have to say, I mean, that was psychologically damaging enough for me. I can't even imagine how it is for some teenagers, being told that well, if you can't convert this person, you're a complete and utter failure. That's just that's so psychologically damaging.
It is to a degree, and I would have to completely agree with the point you made. Yet, there's, as I was trying to say, it's completely a different animal when you put you are a spiritual warrior behind it. When you consider it life or death repercussions of evangelizing, it gives a unique perspective and a dynamic in which you wouldn't expect to see when it comes to trying to convert people to your side.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, I think that the pedestal that most Christians put God up on is a very dangerous pedestal in general. So to mix that in with a military kind of mindset or aspect is just intensifies the amount of scary that I feel, knowing this now, because I mean, before I met you and I talked to you, I had no idea that they were so abusive in how they teach kids, how they treat kids, and just the whole militaristic vibe that they have. Um, I mean, like when you were um, when you were in the Salvation Army, did you experience like any, I guess, violent people, or was there, did you experience any of that? Like, did you see any of that?
On a case by case basis, they're not really violent. It's more they feel they have an authority behind them, and that gives them a right to refuse service to anyone or to deny helping people that aren't within their specific belief set. I mean, let's use homosexuals or transvestites or people that make life choices that they don't consider to be holy. They within the rights and the tariffs of their belief system, they have the right to deny helping these individuals when it could be a life or death situation. They completely consider themselves to be holy and to be able to refuse service to individuals in which they could help change the life of, which I consider a travesty when it happens.
Yeah, that's actually really scary considering the recent law that was passed in Michigan. Because I mean, if that is such a deeply held religious belief, if you're a salvationist living in Michigan, I mean, if you're a paramedic and you're doing your job, you get called to a site and it just so happens that the person is a homosexual. Up there, apparently, they can't force you to help that person. Unless, I mean, I haven't actually read the law, but my cursory understanding of it, I think that that would be, fairly true.
Yeah, but there's also so many other aspects to it, though. I mean, if you really are about helping people, why would you refuse service to individuals in which you could actually be a life changing effect in? I mean, you shouldn't be disqualifying people just because of life choices they make if you are just about helping the person. And it's like at some moments or some situations, their spiritual views are so strong that it can make them think that they're in the right when they're denying people the right to food in a natural disaster, or when they're actually just someone looking for a bed just for the night in a shelter, and just because they're homosexual they get refused service. I mean, when you have the right to do that, I mean, it is a nonprofit private organization that is religious, so they have those rights from a legal standpoint, but just because it's legal doesn't make it right for them to do that.
Right, right. Um, God, I couldn't. I mean, how big of a dick move would that be? Like, especially right now when we're seeing some of the most extreme, cold temperatures and weather and whatnot. Um, how big of a dick move would that be to see someone cold, out in the freezing cold and turn them away just because your magical magician in the sky doesn't like, in particular, where they put their genitals? I mean, how ridiculous does that sound?
Pretty ridiculous. I would say that it is something that if you really consider yourself a holy person, why would you not help everyone and everyone?
Well, and that doesn't really
It's the,
seem as I read on their beliefs page, they believe that both the Old Testament and New Testament is God inspired. But I wonder how do they reconcile contradictions? Like, for instance, Jesus saying, love thy neighbor, but then they feel that they have this holy right to to turn away a homosexual if they need a bed for the night, or if they need to come in out of the cold.
well, they're tariffs. I mean, if they have a contradiction, they usually go to their leadership in their local congregation, and the local spiritual leaders are the ones that help dictate contradictions. I mean, it's either that or they go to their soldier's manual. There is actually other documentation and other books that exist within the Salvation Army that are used outside of the Bible itself.
Oh, really? So,
Yes,
so, so, I mean, they use like supplemental information in order to explain the bullshit contained in the book that they don't read already.
yes.
Yep, sounds Christian.
It's one level above Christianity. I would say that it is something that if they find something that they don't agree with in the Bible itself, they usually go to a spiritual leader within the church itself, which a lot of religious organizations do that. But there's also the tariffs of the Bible itself, and they actually go into those, or they go into their soldier's manual. There is a soldier's manual in the Salvation Army, and that is something that is sort of the lifeblood of their specific perspective, if it's not from a biblical standpoint.
You know, I would have to seriously laugh my ass off if they pulled out their soldier's manual and they were reading it, and they came back to me and was like, we don't give a shit.
It would be said a lot nicer than that.
We don't
Uh,
we don't give a crap. sorry,
because
sorry, I'm being a smartass.
no, it's completely sound and makes sense to me. But when it comes down to it, it's all about the personal perspective and the geographical location in which the Salvation Army chapter you're a part of, because everything's ran on a tiny church congregation level, and then there are other higher ranks in the Salvation Army that weigh in on PR stressful situations or just things that will give the Salvation Army a bad image. Because, I mean, there is a general of the Salvation Army, there is colonels, there are majors, and there is a rank structure in place to help with the mission of the Salvation Army at the core.
I would be a terrible soldier in this army. I really would, because I would constantly be, I don't know, doing push-ups or something. Cause like, Colonel, what does God say?
He says,
Has-
drop it, give me 20.
Colonel, is Jesus really white?
Was Jesus a white man, Colonel? But no, I've actually met the highest rank I've ever met in the Salvation Army would have to have been, I'd say, a colonel.
Is there like a commander in chief? Is there a president that is in the executive branch of the Salvation Army?
No, the closest thing to it is a general, and that general is. Give me 1 second here.
Don't say Petraeus.
No, it's not Petraeus. The general of the Salvation Army is. Who's the general of the Salvation Army? General of the Salvation Army right now is Andre Cox. He's been serving since August 3rd, 2013. He's a resident of London, England. He is the chairman of the High Council of the Salvation Army, and his term limit is unlimited, but most actually do end it by the age of 70. They usually retire and then pass on the position to their successor.
70. I mean, he. I could just see him as like, oh yes, I've had my good run as a soldier for Christ. Guess I won't be forcing any more heathens to submit to my God.
But yes, that's basically how they do that. You actually do have a few things that go on with the Salvation Army itself. The High Council is actually based in London. The Salvation Army was actually founded in London, England.
Wait,
William-
hold on. Stop for a second. There's a High Council of the Salvation Army.
Yes, that's actually the leader
Can
of the organization itself. It's a council of. Go ahead.
can this sound any more like Hogwarts?
It does have a Hogwarts feel to it, depending how you look at it. I mean, they are based out of London, so they could be in Diagon Alley. I don't think they are, but maybe they could be.
How do I get to the High Council, sir? Well, you just run at the wall at 9 3/4. Wait, what?
Yes.
and then you just stand by and you watch him run into a wall. It's like, dumbass. Oh man, I don't feel bad about that joke.
That's a great joke. I gotta.
But how far up, like as far as ranks go, did you get before you actually left?
I was only an enlisted member.
Okay.
I left about maybe 7 months after I went through my whole enlisted member, so I could actually go out, buy a suit for the Salvation Army and the little uniform they have to wear, and I could actually start showing up tomorrow. So
Wow, just out of nowhere, just like, oh yeah, hey, that whole atheist. Psh, no, I'm good. Yeah, God. Let's talk about God.
Let's talk about you and me and how much he's inside you, how he touches you at your little inner pots, how he makes you feel like you're all special and warm, with a great oozy feeling that feels like a warm Holy Spirit jizz.
Now, private. Where did Jesus touch you?
He touched me in the old holy of holiest of places. Wink, wink.
Yeah, Jesus touched me in the ass too, buddy. He's a sick motherfucker.
That goes without saying.
Yeah. So was it hard for you to leave? Like, did you just pack your shit and get out, or what happened with that?
No, I still kept a good rapport with them. Still went to a few organizational events because my mother and sister was still attending that church. So even when I left, I was still unofficially going to stuff. Um, Straight up until the age of 18, when I joined the military and basically came out as an atheist. Even when I was attending an Assemblies of God church, I was still technically a member of the Salvation Army and still an enlisted member. If they needed me to do something, I was there to assist if my mother really needed me to.
Well, I mean, like, what kind of things would you assist with? Just like volunteer efforts, or was there like I guess I just don't know like what other activities you could have been called to do.
Volunteer efforts within the local community, if it's something that was a charitable event being ran by the local chapter of the Salvation Army, if help was needed, I could have been there. Food drives, um, spiritual events for the church, anything along those lines that fall in between the guidelines of that, I could be there in uniform if asked.
When let's see, when did you join the actual military? I guess this was after you turned 18, right?
Yes. I graduated from high school in 2005 and went into the military within that July right after graduating.
were you like, well, I've done this before, guys. I know how to button up shit and whatnot.
I know how to sign a pair of boots and stuff like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, it was a little bit more realistic in the military. Made a lot more sense there. But yeah, it was a completely different dynamic than what the Salvation Army thinks it is. There's a militaristic mindset behind the Salvation Army that you understand, but the military gives, or the army gives it a completely different perspective. I actually came into my own. I got a realization for what the world really is when I joined the military. That it was sort of like seeing the world through rose-colored glasses when I was a part of the Salvation Army.
Yeah, I can definitely see how it would be that way. Just because of religion in general trying to, I guess, misrepresent reality, just in general. Because I know, I grew up Catholic, and they love to misrepresent reality just in general. I believe it was let's see, I went to private Catholic school, and they would teach us these stories about Jesus, which of course, now I even doubt the existence of Jesus as a historical figure. But even even then, I latched onto these good stories about Jesus, and whatnot. So, and come to find out that a lot of the stories that they taught us, not necessarily about Jesus, but just stories in general. Like for instance, in the Catholic private school, they taught us about the little fish symbol They taught us that that was like a secret symbol that was used in order to identify yourself as a Christian back in the day, and that's all bullshit. So I mean, just with religion in general, misrepresenting reality is pretty common. So yeah, I completely understand. Seeing the world new, joining the army and whatnot, because I'm sure that you went. I don't know how many places that you actually went to when you were in the army, but um, I've been to either side of the world, and just seeing those places have kind of been an eye opener for me.
Well, I've actually been able to see over 26 countries, so that was something that sort of helped educate me as a secular-minded individual myself. But once I actually started doing that, it gave me a newfound perspective for how blind I really was and how blind faith really can be when it comes to being a participant in something like the Salvation Army, a religious organization that thinks it creates spiritual warriors for the Lord.
Yeah, still that term spiritual warrior, that just sounds so scary, cuz I think cuz I guess I just think of like a ninja guy with like a god sword, and he like does flips and shit, and then he spouts Bible verses or something. Um and apparently that's supposed to convince you. But um spiritual warrior. Still, I can't. It's tough for me to wrap my head around, around being a spiritual warrior. Um, I mean, how did you? I guess going back to your experiences actually in the Salvation Army, how did you feel being a spiritual warrior at the time? Um, uh, I mean, I know obviously, when your mentor passed away, you started, questioning things. But before that, can you describe, your general feeling about your faith?
Un- Unquestioning dedication. Being able to do something and not feeling that it is wrong because it is ordained by a spiritual being that was greater than myself because he helped bring me into existence.
Wow. I don't know. That sounds pretty scary to me. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about that now? Like how you felt back then?
I'm glad I quit drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I would hope so. Um, uh, but because I mean, I guess I could never really to relate to anybody that really felt that way, because I know I have a lot of friends, now that have felt that way. Like Timothy Havener, he's on the GE page and helps me out a lot. Um, he pretty much was in that same kind of situation, being a spiritual warrior for God and whatnot, and it messed with him pretty bad, and I just feel like my experiences can never really match up to yours or his, because even when I was growing up, I mean, I still, like, I didn't have that kind of unquestioning faith about it. Like things were taught to me as facts, and I accepted them as facts because they were the best information that I could go on at the time. And then when new information got brought up, it's kind of like I just automatically adopted it. But so I've never really felt that way, and that just, it sounds very scary to me.
Well, it's all about your perception on it. I did have friends in the Salvation Army itself. I did have friends in the other religious organizations that I was attached to. It wasn't really scary at the time. It's more looking back on it now and understanding as a secular minded individual the ramifications that type of indoctrination can play on the psyche itself. I mean, believing in imaginary friends past kindergarten is something that is kind of foolish once you actually think about it and think about the realistic ramifications of what that can really do to a person and how it can hinder their perception on situations from a situational perspective.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Uh, oh crap! I had a really good question.
Well, I hope you rethink of it because I would love to actually be able to weigh in on it.
Yeah. Um, crap! I totally blanked out on it.
Well, maybe it'll
uh,
come back to you in the next few minutes while we're still doing this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Hopefully it will. Um, but let's see. Just kind of a general question. How do you feel about those that are still in the Salvationist Army? Like those that are. I just remembered it, but I'm gonna write it down. And but I want you to answer this one first. How do you feel about those that are still in the Salvationist Army? Like I know you said you still have like family that's in there. And how do you feel about those that are coming into it and making those those oaths or signing those pledges?
Well, my family that was still in it. My mother passed away 4 years ago, so she's not in that anymore. And my sister quit going to a Salvation Army church years ago. So I don't really have family in it nowadays. It's sort of time basically helped with that situation, would probably be the best way to put it. Though I wish it would have been a better situation, but I digress from that. Anyone that's actually still in the Salvation Army or helping with that organization, I understand them focusing on the good that the Salvation does as a nonprofit organization, but understand the ramifications that problems may occur within the organization itself. I mean, thinking that all people that are homosexual or that have different decisions or have made different life choices than your own and criminalizing them for their individuality is something that is wrong. Understanding that point right there, I would say, is the most important thing if you are still within the Salvation Army or just the mindset of a Salvationist itself.
Very good, very good. I think those are very good words on that. Okay, so the thing that I had to ask before that I blanked out on and bored people with. um, do you still feel like, or do you feel like you're dealing with any kind of damage, psychological or otherwise, that you might have suffered going through that in the Salvation Army? Like anything that you might have experienced, when you first started signing up at 14 and until you dropped out.
I would say that the deconversion phase from the Salvation Army mindset would be what started my journey from religion. I mean, it was one that was it took a few years, but it was the initial step that made me question my faith itself, which ultimately led to me becoming a secular minded individual and actually being able to be a skeptic. It gave me the basic fundamental tools I needed when it comes down to it. And that is something that, in some weird way, I sort of consider it in a unique way, something that was a good thing because it allowed me to see through the rose-colored glasses, as I've said before. It allowed me to stop sipping the Kool-Aid and see reality for what it really is.
Very good. Oh, well, I'm glad that you were able to come out of that with such a kind of a positive outlook on everything. Um, um, I know me. I started kind of dropping out of religion in high school just to kind of relate. Um, and I started dropping out of it and really questioning it a little bit. but it really wasn't until I was in college that I had even entertained the idea, because like it's kind of like I was just non-religious. Like I was, in all the surveys that you see now, you see, the non-religious option that seems to be growing, and we're at 20%. And so I would have classified myself in the non-religious portion, because while I believed in God, I would consider myself a theist at that time. I wasn't, I didn't go to church. There were several times when I would try to go back to church, and I would try to be religious again, because it's like, I'm not sure about you, and maybe you can relate to this, but down here in the South, it's like you're not right if you're not in church. Like you're not correct. Like you're an outcast, or you're not doing the right thing if you're not in church, or praying to God or something like that. And that's just the general environment around here, like the social environment. And so like I always felt like I had to be in church, and I was being a bad Christian or a bad person if I wasn't being in church. So there were several times when I tried to force myself to go back to church. Did you ever feel yourself like forcing yourself to try to go back to church, to like try that again at all?
It's not that I really felt myself being forced to go back to church. It's that it was questioning if I could really do what I needed to without that spiritual voice leading me. I would say when I first became an atheist, that was something that I really battled with at the core. Just understanding that I am capable of making my own moral decisions and being my own moral compass. Understanding that religion isn't where my sense of right and wrong comes from. It's actually something that's a personal perspective and subjective based off my own personal experiences. Even though I wasn't in a spiritual situation, the moral compass that I've formed over the 18 years before I became an atheist was still there. My moral character and my moral being is still a part of who I was. Understanding that was something that helped me move past that whole phase of questioning who I was as a secular person and an atheist. That's something that sort of helped me during my deconversion phase.
Good. I know. I never really I never really thought about the whole morality issue until I actually read Sam Harris's book. Well, even when I was Christian, I didn't even consider God to be my source of morality or anything. It was kind of just like, I knew some things were good and some things were bad. When I was growing up in the Catholic Church, like I could latch on to things that I could recognize as being good. Like, for instance, accepting the LGBT community. Even though I was a Christian, and knowing what was in the Bible, it wasn't so much that I ignored that part of the Bible. I just knew that part of the Bible was wrong. And with me starting to question religion in high school, that just kind of came with it. Like me not necessarily disregarding that part of the Bible, but me knowing that part of the Bible was wrong was kind of on my downhill from religion and into secularism. Um, and then I didn't knowing I can't even describe how I felt when I heard Sam Harris's book, because I listened to a lot of audiobooks. I heard Sam Harris's book, and thinking about it scientifically, um, about our morals, and the subjective nature of them in general. It just it immediately made sense to me. Like it like didn't take any kind of forcing or anything like that. It just clicked. Whereas when I was in religion, I would have to, I would find myself questioning it or being like, well, I don't know if that sounds right or something. Like, it would confuse me, like, when I was in religion. I mean, did you ever find yourself in those situations? Like, I know that you said that you were pretty unquestioning in your faith early in your religion, but, um, uh, you know, I guess at some point you started, questioning and getting kind of confused by everything, didn't you?
For the most part, yes. I would actually say that once my deconversion phase started, once I became an atheist, once I actually started becoming an outspoken atheist, was when it was really something that started striking a chord with me. Like I said before, once I entered into my deconversion phase, it's something understanding morality and understanding the role that my morality played within my own personal moral perspective is something that played a precedent with me and struck a chord. It's something that actually made it to where it was more of a personal situation for me, and it sort of helped me in my deconversion phase. Because for me, the one book that helped me when I was actually going through my deconversion was Letters to a Young Contrarian by Christopher Hitchens. That was something that was an amazing work of literature that was by Hitch, and it was like a Hitch slap to the face when I first read it. I mean, the moral points made in that book struck home with me and made it easier for me to be an atheist, easier for me to take on the role of a secular minded individual.
Yeah, well, Hitch normally has that way about him, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. He's one of my favorite of the.
Yeah, I'd say, of course, the Four Horsemen in general have been my favorite authors. Although I haven't really read Dennett all that much, or listened to him rather. Um, but but yeah, definitely Hitch and Dawkins and Harris have been my go-to. Ones that I went to first. When I started really researching, and kind of, I guess, building my case. For questioning God or whatnot, because I kind of felt like I had to have a good reason to question God, considering where I was brought up and everything like that. Um, um, do you experience any of that where you live? Like just general this general social environment of you need to believe in God, or is that just like a Southern Bible Belt thing?
Well, I've actually been in the Bible Belt myself. I spent 3 years in Texas, which is at times one of the more dramatic places in the Bible Belt. I mean, especially with the thing that went on with the recent case with textbooks, and them actually saying that Moses is to be credited with our Constitution itself. I
Well,
mean,
oh no, okay, look, you're not giving Moses the kind of credit he needs, okay? Now, listen, we all know that Moses created the Constitution along with modern democracy after he parted the Red Sea with his ass cheeks.
that's was that before or after he was smoking burning bushes and speaking to fires that were lit by magic.
Okay, now look, all of that was way before when he was on weed. Okay, he went off weed, kind of like Snoop Dogg, in order for him to, and when he wanted to coach his son's soccer team, and then he went back on it, and that's why he wandered for like 40 years.
That's why he wandered for 40 years. He had him and the homies just basically wandering the desert and just like doing some magic stuff, doing some carvings on some stones, and just getting back to nature.
Do you think that he actually struck a stone and like water came out? Fuck no. He was hitting it hard at that point. He was like, I got past the water, dude. Oh, let
Ask
me
me to
just.
pull, man. That's where my water's coming from. You got to understand that the Lord's on the mountain, and I'm going to make some water from this stone. That's all I got to do, but I'm going to use this water to smoke some weed, man.
Okay, but anyways, you spent 3 years in Texas, and Texas are dumb. The people making decisions in Texas are dumb shits. Not necessarily that people in Texas are dumb shits, although I'm sure most people would think that. Um, but anyways, you spent 3 years in Texas.
Yes, I spent 3 years in Texas when I was actually in the military. I was there from 2009 to 2012, um, which was an interesting experience. It was a great time to serve, yet it was an interesting experience to say the least.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you would like to say that maybe I didn't get to question you about or anything like that?
Um, Check out our new joint operation that me, the Foxhole Atheist, and Albany Rose are co-founders of. Make sure to look at Secular TV and keep an eye out for new and interesting programming coming to that network soon. If you have an idea for a show to have on Secular TV or would like to host something on Secular TV, feel free to send me or Godless Engineer or any atheist in the community a message. Well, any atheist attached to Secular TV a message, and we'll be able to help you out. That would probably, the best person to message would be myself, the neo-atheist Mike Phelps, or Randy Bevan, the Foxhole Atheist, or Albany Rose, or Godless Engineer will send you in the direction of either three of us because he's in pretty good contact with all of us. So, yeah, check out Secular TV or my own personal YouTube channel, which you can find by typing The Neo-Atheist into Google or YouTube. Just type in The Neo-Atheist, no spaces, and you will come across my personal channel. Best way to contact me is over on Facebook under The Neo-Atheist or on Twitter. So remember, if you're on a social networking or social media sites, type in The Neo-Atheist. Maybe you'll find me.
Awesome. And I am the Godless Engineer. You can catch me here on YouTube, on Facebook. Just type in Godless Engineer or Godless Engineering. You should be able to find me somewhere. I appreciate everybody that was able to join me tonight. Um, and the neo atheist here to discuss the Salvation Army, as long as with my own personal experiences growing up and how it relates to the neo atheist experience. Um, and I hope that next time I get a wild bug up my ass and decide to do a live event, everybody will join me again.
Because it is an amazing show.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I think we're going to go ahead and stop the stream now, and I guess we will try to catch you guys again sometime.